Before the Second World War, the industrialized world produced 1 million tons of chemicals a year. By 2005, it was 5 million. The post-war boom saw mass production, the frenzy of progress, consumerism, and petrochemical magic create the unbreakable baby bottle and plastic cutlery.
Crude oil, like everything else, is made up of billions of tiny molecules. And using the magic of research, oil companies compete with each other in taking the petroleum molecule apart and rearranging it into, well, you name it, fabrics, toothbrushes, tires, insecticides, cosmetics, weed killers, a whole galaxy of things to make a better life on Earth.
Raid's here! Raid! 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 Raid!
Yes, Raid. New bug killer discovery from Johnson's Wax.
Use Ajax,
Boom, boom.
the foaming cleanser.
Boom, 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 boom.
Gets things clean, just like a whiz. You'll stop paying the elbow tax
when you start cleaning with Ajax.
So use Ajax.
Our ordinary everyday lives are full of chemicals which escape from surrounding objects. Some have a special characteristic. They are capable of hijacking our hormonal intimacy, blocking our hormones or imitating them and affecting their levels. They are called endocrine disruptors. Natural hormones are produced by the endocrine system. The hypothalamus, the pineal and the pituitary glands in the brain, the thyroid, the thymus, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the ovaries in women, and the testes in men. Adrenaline, for instance, is a hormone that helps to control stress. A lack of insulin may cause diabetes. The body secretes the male sexual hormone, testosterone, in precise amounts and at specific times. No more, no less than necessary. A minute quantity is extremely effective. But endocrine disruptors found in plastics, phthalates for instance, can dupe the hormonal system and take over its mechanisms by blocking testosterone action. Endocrine disruptors interfere with subtle hormonal maneuvers. The result is like playing a Chopin sonata with a hammer.
When experiments, epidemiological experiments, reveal relationships between a chemical exposure and a disease, that was done in a way that you could separate the population that was exposed and the one that wasn't. Like, for example, people that apply pesticides in the fields versus people that live in the city. But when you talk about plastics, when you talk about things that are present in everyone's urine, in everyone's blood, then you don't have that luxury because you cannot distinguish a non-exposed population and an exposed population to conduct these human studies.
It's this rapid adaptability, together with the attractiveness, usefulness, and low cost of the plastic itself, that has made this industry one of the fastest growing in the nation's history.
What's it to you?
Plastic, chemistry's greatest triumph, has gradually invaded our daily lives. Its production over the last 10 years is higher than that of the entire 20th century. But plastic contains several types of endocrine disruptors. Notoriously present in baby bottles, bisphenol A has the unfortunate drawback of imitating the female sexual hormone. estrogen. Bisphenol A is used to make polycarbonate plastic and epoxy resins, which are the ingredients of printed circuits, kitchen rolls, plastic dishes, plugs, floor coverings, household electric appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, microwaves, mixers, hoovers, dishwashers, metal furniture, cash desk tickets, all sorts of tickets, glues and adhesive, water bottles, dental fillings, food packaging, car equipment, plastic recipients of all kinds, the inside coatings of tins and cans, hair dryers, protective glasses, sports helmets, rackets, skis, garden tools, cameras, glasses, DVDs, cosmetic tubes, water flasks, irons, televisions, razors, computers. France has banned its use in baby bottles. That is exactly what happens to mice and rats. When they are exposed to endocrine disruptors during pregnancy, their progeny develop hyperactivity and learning defects, insulin resistance, weight gain. In females, tumours of the mammary glands, abnormal ovarian pathologies. In males, prostate cancer, infertility, genital abnormalities such as the incomplete descent of the testes into the scrotum. In humans too, adult diseases can be triggered in the fetus.
Listen to the sounds of freshness.
Among the suspects, some pesticides imitate estrogens, but there are also some plastic ingredients that have the regrettable habit of blocking testosterone. Phthalates are in PVC, shower curtains, plastic floorings and surfaces, mats, detergents, sprays, water repellent materials, balloons, food film, windows, glues and adhesives, patterns on clothes, perfumes, cosmetics like lipstick and nail varnish, medicines, shampoo, aftershave, hairsprays and gels, gloves, zodiacs, games, hospital equipment, flip-flops, bottles, sneakers, shoe soles, cables and wires, insecticides, and even in water hoses. Another family of endocrine disruptors is suspected of having effects on the brain and causing dyslexia or memory and attention disorders in children. It is the family of polybrominated diphenyl ethers, or PBDEs, additives used to prevent fire. To respect fire safety standards, they were stuck into inflammable objects and plastics right back in the early 70s. PBDEs hide in fitted carpets and rugs, washing machines, cookers, hods, toasters, refrigerators, mixers, irons, dishwashers, microwaves, mattresses and pillows, radio alarm clocks, pipes, tents, furniture material and fillings, couches, curtains, office chairs, printed circuits, fax machines, computers, printers, the packaging of all these objects, light bulbs, plugs, cables and wires, batteries, car equipment, car radios, car batteries, ventilators, hair dryers, hoovers, hair curlers or straighteners, telephones, televisions, remote controls, DVD players, hi-fis, radios, etc., etc. The extreme toxicity of lead didn't prevent its presence in our petrol for 60 years, the only pretext being that the proof was not irrefutable. But research takes time, and scientists are not pizza delivery men.
This model shows how just the right amount of fluid containing tetraethyl lead and dye is added to the gasoline.
Here is a recipe for concocting a contemporary disease. Marinate a group of endocrine disruptors in amniotic liquid of the 50s and 60s, and when these children of the synthetic age reach adulthood, note the increase of problems in public health statistics, of obesity, for example.
So the chemical is long gone, but the effect of that chemical lasts forever.
About 10 chemicals can make rats and mice obese, even at low doses. Several pesticides, bisphenol A, and perfluorooctanoic acid, found in Teflon. This is where the destiny of a human being differs from that of the laboratory rat. We are indeed exposed to endocrine disruptors, imitating estrogens, blocking testosterone, or disturbing thyroid hormones at low doses. But this happens every single day of our lives. And above all, at the same time. A modern-style cocktail with no nice intoxicating effect. In his laboratory, Andreas Kortenkamp takes such minute doses of endocrine disruptors that they have no effect in a test tube or on baby rats. Then he prepares a cocktail of chemicals that block testosterone. Let's say 1 phthalate, 2 pesticides, and 1 drug. And then these supposedly harmless doses reduce the anogenital distance and cause penis and testis malformation. In rich countries over the last 50 years, these trends in humans are indeed alarming. Abnormalities of the male genital tract have doubled. Testis cancer has become the first cancer amongst young men. Fertility has decreased by 50%. Prostate cancer is 4 times higher. On the women's side, it's not just breast cancer. The onset of puberty appears at around 8 or 9 in young American girls. In adults, the polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis, and miscarriages have caused a rise in fertility problems. 1 European child out of 5 and more than 1 adult out of 10 is obese. Diabetes increases by 5% every year. There are also cardiovascular diseases, immune system alterations, asthma, and thyroid problems, not to mention hyperactivity, learning defects, and behavior disorders that seem to be increasing in children. In other words, pretty much the same diseases as those of laboratory animals exposed to endocrine disruptors. Excepting Denmark, which has published a guide for the information of pregnant women, public authorities are not really reactive or even talkative about this question. So people have to sort things out for themselves with fragments of information. It's impossible to be sure if there are phthalates in your holiday flip-flops, bisphenol A in your razor, or PBDEs in the remote control of your TV. And when labels do exist, they are minute and incomprehensible for the average person.
Material that comes in contact with food, in the processing of the food, in the packaging of the food, in the shipping, in the storage, in the cooking, any product that contains PVC will allow the food to pull off some of that PVC. We don't know exactly where this happens, but we do know by measuring food, as has been done in a number of studies, that it's in there.
Even with the greatest will in the world, we can't totally protect ourselves from the great chemical invasion, unless we decide to return to our roots and to our caves.
Hello, I'm Mr. Money.
I'm Mr. Money.
I'm a little concerned that we are just actively getting us to extinction because of the things we do in our arrogance, and it's a very bad combination, being arrogant and ignorant.
Yes, chemistry has changed the world we live in.
It takes the determination of a society to make this change. I think I have confidence that we can do this, but it's going to take everyone understanding why the old way isn't working anymore.
In this new world of industrial chemistry, the horizon is unlimited. Unexplored potentialities beckon. Hidden secrets of nature sound a call to this young man, the industrial chemist, the pioneer of tomorrow.
Good morning, Sherlock. Endocrine disruptors are special chemicals. They are encrusted in thousands of consumer products. Bisphenol A became the most famous when it was banned from baby bottles. But that was just a trifle. They are in cosmetics, plastics, pesticides, everywhere. There may be hundreds of them, seeping into bodies, into nature. Blood, umbilical cords, breast milk, rivers, polar bears, your mother. We're surrounded. Endocrine means hormonal. Endocrine disruptors hijack the hormonal system and play with hormones such as testosterone and estrogens. Fetuses are the most vulnerable, those who don't have the choice. Unborn children, that means us. If our hormones are disrupted during pregnancy, they can leave a ticking time bomb which will explode inside us years later. Infertility, genital abnormalities, breast, prostate, or testicle cancer, precocious puberty, developmental problems, obesity, diabetes. Endocrine disruptors are all suspected culprits. Europe promised to protect us, the future generations. But something went wrong. Your mission is to go back to 2009 and find out why. Good luck! Good luck!
My mission report starts at the European Parliament in 2009. The members of the Parliament decide that endocrine disruptors should be regulated, some even banned. It's high time for us future Europeans to be protected. But how do you recognize an endocrine disruptor from just any other chemical? Europe needs a special tool to spot them wherever they're hiding. In the toaster, toothpaste, or in yesterday's leftovers. The tool in question is an official definition. The European Commission has until the end of 2013, no longer, to find the words. For Parliament, scientists and NGOs, finding a definition for endocrine disruptors is an emergency. However, the industry considers it a threat for thousands of products. But the responsibility for the final decision lies with the European Commission. Our destiny is in its hands. A battle breaks out behind the scenes of European democracy. This definition will concern all economic sectors: plastics, detergents, foodstuffs. Sent to the front line, the chemical and pesticide industry unite forces to cut losses. The formula for successful lobbying? Capture the public decision. Yet democracy, according to the Commission, consists in a dialogue with stakeholders, a code name for NGOs representing civil society, and with industry representing industry. In Brussels, lobbying targets decision-makers who work in the offices of the European Commission. They are the Directorates General, known as the DGs. Each of them is in charge of a specific sector. DG Sanko, for example, is responsible for health and consumers. DG Enterprise for industry. DGs are headed by commissioners, super ministers, below the president, José Manuel Barroso, in the hierarchy. DG Environment is designated as the chef de file on the endocrine disruptor file.
Welcome.
Its job? To establish a list of scientific criteria in order to produce an identikit of the possible culprits and help get rid of them. This important responsibility is entrusted to a handful of civil servants in Unit D3, 5th floor, end of the corridor, on the left.
Hormones have various functions in our bodies, but during development they have a very important function, which is programming. They program our development. And certain chemicals have the ability to interfere with these programming effects of hormones, for example, in fetal life. And that can have quite severe and irreversible consequences for life into adulthood, for the rest of someone's life.
Thank you.
The report which we have written, the state-of-the-art assessment on endocrine disruptors, was very positively and gladly received by the European Commission.
What the report concludes is indeed that this is an issue which needs policy attention, and that the science base, and that was for us the very important conclusion in the report, that the scientific basis for developing legislation or for developing policy has significantly improved and is rather solid.
It was not so gladly received by industrial circles.
No sooner published in early 2012, the Kortenkamp report becomes the object of a series of attacks disguised as critiques. Most of these are financed by the industry and entrusted to scientific lobbying firms. The business of these companies is to produce scientific material used to convince the authorities in defense of dangerous products like bisphenol A, pesticides, or cigarettes. Since science is at the heart of many political decisions, it is the target of partisan influence in the corridors of democracy. Industry exploits science to delay, water down, or fight regulations. Science lobbying is called manufacturing doubt. The strategy was invented by the tobacco industry in the 50s to prevent the implementation of public health measures against cigarettes. Uncertainty is the driving force behind science. But to protect us, Europe has a political tool called the precautionary principle. It would take too long to prove the link between the cause, endocrine disruptors, and their effects, illnesses that develop 8 months or 40 years later. We are not guinea pigs. The precautionary principle makes it possible to remove products from the market, which is a problem for business. Industry often uses the very same arguments to criticize the principle.
Le principe de précaution appliqué de manière abusive empêche l'innovation.
The precautionary principle stimulates innovation rather than inhibits it. And this works because we know there's a strong empirical base that says well-designed environmental regulations and green taxes stimulate innovation, mainly because it brings forth smarter alternatives.
Je ne connais pas d'exemple de produit qui a été suspendu en raison du principe de précaution et qui soit revenu ensuite sur le marché. Donc ça, c'est vraiment une application abusive du principe de précaution.
Of course, in any debate about the precautionary principle, the question arises, has it been overused or used inappropriately? With hindsight, we can see that there were opportunities and justifications for taking action much, much earlier, decades, in fact, in many of the cases.
This is ground control to future generations. Science is on our side. Endocrine disruptors are a textbook case for the application of the precautionary principle, but industry can always bypass it.
If it does, we're lost. Watch out. The devil is in the details, and lobbying can be hidden in super technical documents.
Industry's first trick concerns the threshold question. In Europe, all chemicals must go through a sort of mill called REACH. an acronym for Registration, Evaluation, Authorization and Restriction of Chemicals. The European Commission has to decide which tube to put endocrine disruptors through. Tube number 1, they're only dangerous above a certain threshold. Tube number 2, they are dangerous, full stop.
This means that we need to look at the science, try to understand it, and then make a decision on whether or not we think that predominantly science shows that all endocrine disruptors have a threshold, or all endocrine disruptors do not have a threshold, or maybe some have a threshold and some don't have a threshold.
First option, the Commission decides that there are no thresholds. In that case, endocrine disruptors would be banned and substituted. But nothing prevents the Commission from ignoring science and deciding that thresholds do exist. This is, of course, the second option that industry prefers. It would spare the majority of its products. So all they need to do is to persuade the Commission.
I think industry wants to have the right answer. And we believe at the moment, since we've considered thresholds to be a very real aspect of these substances, that the data will be presented to show where the thresholds are.
The second trick is hidden in the criteria for endocrine disruptors. DG Environment is working hard on a list including the severity of the effects, the potency of the effects, the irreversibility of the effects. All criteria would contribute to the development of a scientific identikit of the suspects. The industry's trick would be to filter endocrine disruptors and only select the most potent ones, thus clearing all the others. The potency criteria may well only be an astute lobbying trick, but the industry has found heavyweight allies to help it: Germany and the United Kingdom.
The British authorities openly say that the labeling of a chemical as an endocrine disruptor has enormous commercial consequences, which is true, but therefore they want to regulate only the worst offenders.
This potency trick is something the pesticide industry could do with. In 2009, Parliament concocted a personal mill for it and decided that all pesticides identified as endocrine disruptors should be withdrawn from the market. If industry manages to impose the potency criteria, it will be able to reduce the radical consequences of its mistreatment. Potency criteria or threshold? DG Environment refuses to give in to exterior pressure, but its resistance begins to cause concern within the European Commission itself. And its betrayal is organised under the Commission's very roof. Two directorates general in particular are annoyed: DG Enterprise, which is responsible for the well-being of industry, and DG Sanko, in charge of health and consumers. But whose health? To general astonishment and without warning, DG Sanko initiates a parallel process in competition with the work of DG Environment. It mandates an official agency, the European Food Safety Authority, the EFSA. So the EFSA must also give its opinion on endocrine disruptors. An ingenious bureaucratic sleight of hand. If the EFSA validates the demands of the industry, DG Environment will have to change its course.
Oh, I think you can take it.
That's fine. We were informed more or less at the same time as the request was made. I don't have the dates.
Not a single civil servant of DG Environment was sent a copy of the mandate signed by the director of DG Sanko on the 1st of August 2012.
No, we received it a few days afterwards, indeed.
No comment from DG Sanko on this brutal short circuit. Its director, Paola Testori Koji, cancels our interview at the last moment.
Si je dois insister auprès de Madame Testoni pour l'avoir elle, c'est avoir les questions par avant.
The official explanation? The Commission spokesman does not understand, he says, why several people need to be interviewed. In support, DG Enterprise also refuses to give an interview.
Pour augmenter les chances d'avoir 3 interlocuteurs au niveau directeur général, je vous propose que vous m'envoyez les questions par avant.
On the pretext that the Commission has only one voice, DG Environment is forced to fake a love affair, when in fact everyone sleeps in a different room.
The reason why they didn't want to be interviewed or answering your request, well, we've decided within the Commission on your request that we in DG Environment, having the lead on the file of endocrine disruption, should perform this interview with you and give you all the feedback that we can on behalf of our colleagues in the different services.
And finally, there is no trace of any potency criteria in the EFSA's report. DG Sanko's little game is a fiasco. Under siege by the lobbies, pressed by some member states and now isolated within the Commission, DG Environment still refuses to give in to pressure. In March 2013, the European Parliament sends in reinforcements. It doesn't have much power over the Commission, but adopts a resolution asking it to reject the ideas of a threshold and a cut-off criterion such as potency. Most of all, it calls for urgent action. At the end of May 2013, DG Environment brings 3 years of work to a close. It submits its proposition to the whole European Commission. It hasn't given in. Exit the threshold and the potency criterion. Au revoir, endocrine disruptors in potatoes and dolls. At last, we can be born in peace. But DG Sanko's betrayal was in fact just a warning. All of a sudden, nothing. Blackout. Total paralysis.
Something must have happened in the European Commission. I'm not privy to this debate, but someone must have pulled a brake, because all of a sudden what surfaced was the idea of having to conduct a so-called impact assessment. Everyone knows impact assessments in the European Union take at least a year, if not longer. Why now? Why does this happen half a year before the deadline set by the European Parliament to the European Commission?
Since our whole activity up until June was based on developing science-based criteria, we had not made very many efforts on the economic part. We also need to take into account that what we do may have a negative impact on the economy, and we have to make our decisions aware of that impact.
We know from the history of previous efforts to do cost-benefit analyses, impact assessments, that they are deeply flawed, generally speaking, because it is much easier to put numbers on costs of regulation than it is to put numbers on what are the benefits to society over the next 4 or 5 decades of not having reproductive problems.
Talking about the identification of what is an endocrine disruptor. This should be a science-based procedure. So evidence-based policy making. What we see here now is policy-based evidence making.
What's got into the Commission? And what about its promise to spare our prostates and our mammary glands? European law is sometimes well made. We citizens can insist on explanations and make a freedom of information request. Hundreds of partly censored internal documents help reconstitute the lobbying operation that took the whole process off the rails at the beginning of summer 2013. On the 6th of June, the chemical, pesticide and plastic lobbies are still trying to make DG Environment capitulate. They write to complain that the current discussion appears to be based more on political rather than scientific considerations.
For such an important decision with an enormous potential and significant impact on many substances and their uses, we strongly urge that any outcome is based on sound science and not on political interests.
Il faut que les critères qui vont dire vous êtes exclu soient des critères basés sur une science raisonnable, la fameuse sound science des anglo-saxons.
There's a term used very frequently in these debates about the appropriate use of precaution and so on, which is the phrase sound science, which really, who could argue with that? Who wants to propose or support unsound science? But it's a term whose historical origins are very interesting. It too was invented by the tobacco industry in the 80s.
C'est quelque chose qui est utilisé comme un mot slogan, comme une espèce de mot obus pour disqualifier toute étude scientifique qui n'irait pas dans leur sens. Donc tout ce qui est, disons, qui va dans le sens de l'industrie, c'est sound science, et tout ce qui ne va pas dans le sens de l'industrie, c'est de la junk science, c'est de la science pourrie.
And one problem, of course, with sound science is that the current generation of policymakers, they're for the most part not aware of where it comes from, i.e. a PR strategy from the tobacco industry.
The lobbies dig into the tobacco industry toolbox once more, leaving a strange impression of déjà vu. But turning the sense of words around isn't enough, and the chemical industry strikes higher up the ladder. On the 24th of June, it writes to Janusz Potocznik, the European Commissioner for the Environment.
There are two elements of this letter, as an example of the many letters that we've gotten. There's the tone, which you refer to, and there's the content. And of course, our professional duty is to respond to the content and avoid looking at the tone.
No need to raise the voice with those DGs which are more receptive to economic blackmail, especially at the beginning of summer 2013. The EU and the US are negotiating the creation of a transatlantic trade and investment partnership, the TTIP. The objective? To remove the barriers for commercial exchange. How? By aligning regulations. But aligning them upwards, Europe, or downwards, United States? The definition of endocrine disruptors comes at a rather bad time. American goods blocked at the frontiers by the precautionary principle? This barrier to innovation, putting a brake on progress? Inconceivable for the industry.
There are many differences, and clearly business is wishing that some of these differences be ironed away or be removed.
Ce qui est en jeu, c'est la remise sur la table de tout notre héritage réglementaire des 40 dernières années. Donc ça inclut évidemment l'encadrement des produits chimiques, REACH. Ça permet également aussi à l'industrie, et c'est évidemment très intéressant pour l'industrie chimique, pour l'industrie, enfin pour tous ceux qui sont sur les perturbateurs endocriniens, sur les OGM, de pouvoir régler dans des négociations secrètes des débats qu'ils ont perdus ou qu'ils sont en train de perdre dans le débat public.
Where there are issues that are being hotly debated, like the criteria for endocrine disruptors, one sees very strong voices now also from the pesticides industry from the US.
Get rid of the precautionary principle and solve the endocrine disruptor problem behind closed doors. The industry is quite clear about its intentions, but the Commission much less. DG Trade, which is in charge of negotiations with the TTIP, only produces 3 censored documents. It justifies this by saying that making the others public would endanger our relations with the United States.
If there is a chemical issue and if there is an issue concerning endocrine disruptors, we are consulted. Now, regarding the actual content of the negotiations, I can't reveal. I cannot reveal very much.
On pourrait s'attendre à ce que les parlementaires élus, qui sont en théorie souverains, enfin qui en théorie ont quand même le droit, enfin sont censés incarner quand même notre liberté collective, à nous, citoyens, est un droit de regard sur ces trucs-là. A priori, les parlements nationaux ne seront même pas consultés pour cet accord-là.
The industry gets round the DG Environment pocket of resistance. The most influential DGs are now its allies, and it's reaching higher and higher up inside the Commission. Here, people aren't familiar with the file. Here, the industry's emails are the only source of information. Here, they can convince people to freeze the process and make an impact assessment. Here, they only need to give a scientific veneer to their arguments to perfect the blackmail.
Les fongicides, par exemple, permettent de contribuer à la protection du rendement en blé, et c'est 10 à 20% du rendement en blé qui pourrait disparaître si ces produits n'étaient plus utilisés.
This is from Bayer Crop Science, which is a branch of Bayer company, chemical company, German, writing to the Secretary General, which is sort of the service directly under the President. And what this letter is saying is that Bayer believes that we should do an impact assessment on the work that we're doing regarding criteria development and its implementation.
This letter from Bayer, a chemical and pesticide corporation, is addressed to number 3 of the Secretary General, Marianne Klingbeil, who is in charge of impact assessments. On the 2nd of July, number 2, Catherine Day, makes a decision in favour of the industry. The impact assessment will be launched.
If the Secretary General, who is the highest civil servant, says, I want an impact assessment, then that's it.
Les différentes DG ne s'étant pas mises d'accord, la Commission a décidé de faire une étude d'impact. Alors, quel a été le rôle et le poids, je dirais, de la proposition de l'industrie? Là, je ne peux pas vous dire.
Sherlock speaking. The Commission missed the 2 deadlines in June and December 2013, and the impact assessment hasn't even started.
An impact assessment takes more than a year, so the final decision is postponed. Till when? We'll be born soon. What's going to happen to us?
Nous regrettons le fait qu'il y a un retard dans le planning, mais ce retard étant expliqué par la nécessité de faire une étude d'impact, c'est le côté positif. Donc nous sommes aujourd'hui un peu balancés entre regret et satisfaction de voir l'étude d'impact. Notre objectif, c'est de faire en sorte que les réglementations qui soient votées et donc applicables soient des réglementations équilibrées, basées sur la science et qui permettent suffisamment de lisibilité à l'ensemble des acteurs, société civile, mais aussi et surtout l'industrie.
Or what?
Il est trop tôt aujourd'hui pour dire si l'industrie pourra ou ne pourra pas attaquer la Commission européenne, puisqu'on n'a pas encore le projet final. Je trouve logique néanmoins qu'en cas de besoin, des actions juridiques soient mises en œuvre.
In February 2014, after 9 months of silence, the European Commission decides to justify the delay. The excuse? Too much scientific doubt about endocrine disruptors. If it wasn't about the integrity of our testicles, it would be almost comic. Its alibi? An editorial published in several scientific journals and a letter sent to the top floor of the Commission. The authors defend the same point of view as the industry on thresholds, and they attack the precautionary approach of DG Environment. Coincidentally, this operation took place in June 2013, at the height of the industry lobbying offensive.
Scientifically unfounded precaution drives the European Commission's recommendations on EDC regulation, endocrine disrupting chemical regulation,
while defying common sense, well-established science and risk assessment principles. This reads like the title of an industry attack or podium discussion. This is not a title that you would normally have for a scientific editorial.
This editorial was accompanied by a letter to the scientific advisor of Commission President Barroso, Professor Anne Glover.
The chief scientific advisor advises the president of the Commission, so she's in the upper echelons of the Commission.
The letter was saying is that they felt that there was a danger of the Commission focusing too much on the precautionary principle in their review of regulation around endocrine disrupting chemicals. In other words, making the regulation much tighter so that many chemicals perhaps would have to be withdrawn from use.
The letter contained some, to me, quite surprising errors in fact. For example, the claim that the European Commission wants to regulate endocrine disruptors solely on the basis of culture dish assays, which is absolutely not true, and I can only express surprise at some of my dear colleagues who've also signed this letter that they didn't spot this. Professor Glover invited representatives of the two camps to debate this in her offices.
But once in the office, surprise, surprise, the authors of the editorial had admitted their mistakes and changed opinions about the threshold issue. So why mobilize a whole regiment just to do a volte-face a few months later? Was this some kind of a sick joke?
Change of heart, change of mind? I do not know. Or am I too cynical to say, doesn't matter anymore, damage done?
The sad thing is that it did contribute to questioning what DG Environment did, and did contribute to all of this now being subject to an impact assessment.
The intervention by the editors and the letter to Glover was designed to interfere with the regulatory processes of the European Commission.
It was a political act. I don't know whether all of this was engineered by the industry or not, but it's so unusual that it really questions the credibility of those scientists.
When you look closer, almost none of these scientists is a specialist in endocrine disruption, though the majority do have close links with the industry. This was the case for 17 out of 18 authors of the editorial, and for 33 of the 56 signatories of the letter to Anne Glover. A motley crowd, linked to chemical and pesticide giants like Bayer and BASF, and organizations financed by cosmetic and food processing corporations. And, oh yes, there are even a few veterans from the tobacco industry among them.
For me, it is not a bad thing if scientists have some kind of interactions with industry. If you're a research scientist and you have had at some time a research project with industry, it does not mean you're an employee of that industry.
We are aware of the support of the European taxpayer. We are grateful for it. And we are striving to give something back to make life better in the European Union. I have no illusion about our range and our power to do so. We are scientists, we are not lobbyists.
Lobbying means being at the right moment with the right person with the right message.
Anne Glover, June 2013. The process has to stop. The right person, the right message, the right moment. With this scientific guarantee at the summit, the Commission had its alibi for the impact assessment, even if the pseudo-scientific controversy had been a big flop in its own offices.
We feel that perhaps that post is being misused to enter economic and political debates rather than sticking to the science.
I see in the press all the time people making statements that I'm in the pocket of industry or I work for industry. I just don't, nor have I ever done.
Le fait même que ce poste existe est un enjeu stratégique qui intéresse l'industrie et qu'ils veulent pouvoir utiliser dans l'avenir.
I'm not the voice of industry. I'm not the voice of politics. I'm not the voice. What I am is the voice of science.
Cette notion même qu'on pourrait avoir un conseiller en chef scientifique auprès de la Commission pose problème, parce que d'abord, qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un chef de la science?
Il y a de plus en plus de décideurs, et moralité, il y a de moins en moins de décisions qui se prennent. Ou, au pire, on prend des décisions négatives, principe de précaution.
So, would you like a sound science chief in the Commission?
Bah oui.
April 2014. Things are still blocked. The impact assessment hasn't begun. Europe has no official definition. There is still no regulation for endocrine disruptors.
While they defend their profits, others fight in their offices. But have these ladies and gentlemen forgotten who they are talking about? Their daughters, your grandsons.
It's about us.
Is Europe doing enough to protect citizens against harmful chemicals? Well, France and Sweden don't believe so. The Scandinavian kingdom has sued the European Commission over its failure to ban substances that disrupt hormones, the so-called endocrine disruptors. These chemicals can be found in everyday objects such as cosmetics, textiles and detergents. But more and more researchers believe that they can trigger diseases like cancer or diabetes.
The European chemical industry has a very strong lobby organization, and of course the environment organizations try to put counter-arguments. For me as a minister, I listen a lot to science and have my own scientific panel, and we are in the Swedish government convinced that we need to do something, and we will not allow the Commission to stop us improving national legislation or European legislation by not coming forward with scientific criteria. That's why we decided to go to the court.
Under pressure from Sweden, but also from France, the European Commission has just published a roadmap to better identify these disruptors. If nothing's done, experts believe European states could collectively end up paying 31 billion euros, dealing with health problems caused by exposure to these products.
I'm Mr. Money.
Things that are present in everyone's urine, in everyone's blood. Then you don't have that luxury because you cannot distinguish a non-exposed population and an exposed population to conduct these human studies.
It's this rapid adaptability, together with the attractiveness, usefulness, and low cost of the plastic itself, that has made this industry one of the fastest growing in the nation's history.
What's it to you?
Plastic, chemistry's greatest triumph, has gradually invaded our daily lives. Its production over the last 10 years is higher than that of the entire 20th century. But plastic contains several types of endocrine disruptors. Notoriously present in baby bottles, bisphenol A has the unfortunate drawback of imitating the female sexual hormone, estrogen. Bisphenol A is used to make polycarbonate plastic and epoxy resins, which are the ingredients of printed circuits, kitchen rolls, plastic dishes, plugs, floor coverings, household electric appliances, refrigerators, washing machines, microwaves, mixers, hoovers, dishwashers, metal furniture, cash desk tickets, all sorts of tickets, glues and adhesive, water bottles, dental fillings, food packaging, car equipment, plastic recipients of all kinds, the inside coatings of tins and cans, hair dryers, protective glasses, sports helmets, rackets, skis, garden tools, cameras, glasses, DVDs, and all ethers, or PBDEs, additives used to prevent fire. To respect fire safety standards, they were stuck into inflammable objects and plastics right back in the early 70s. PBDEs hide in fitted carpets and rugs, washing machines, cookers, hods, toasters, refrigerators, mixers, irons, dishwashers, microwaves, mattresses and pillows, radio alarm clocks, pipes, tents, furniture material and fillings, couches, curtains, office chairs, printed circuits, fax machines, computers, printers, the packaging of all these objects, light bulbs, plugs, cables and wires, batteries, car equipment, car radios, car batteries, ventilators, hair dryers, hoovers, hair curlers or straighteners, telephones, televisions, remote controls, DVD players, hi-fis, radios, etc., etc. The extreme toxicity of lead didn't prevent its presence in our petrol for 60 years, the only pretext being that the proof was not irrefutable. But research takes time, and scientists are not pizza delivery men.
This model shows how just the right amount of fluid containing tetraethyl lead and dye is added to the gasoline.
Cosmetic tubes, water flasks, irons, televisions, razors, computers. France has banned its use in baby bottles. That is exactly what happens to mice and rats. When they are exposed to endocrine disruptors during pregnancy, their progeny develop hyperactivity and learning defects, insulin resistance, weight gain. In females, tumours of the mammary glands, abnormal ovarian pathologies. In males, prostate cancer, infertility, genital abnormalities such as the incomplete descent of the testes into the scrotum. In humans too, adult diseases can be triggered in the fetus.
Listen to the sounds of freshness.
Among the suspects, some pesticides imitate estrogens, but there are also some plastic ingredients that have the regrettable habit of blocking testosterone. Phthalates are in PVC, shower curtains, plastic floorings and surfaces, mats, detergents, sprays, water repellent materials, balloons, food film, windows, glues and adhesives, patterns on clothes, perfumes, cosmetics like lipstick and nail varnish, medicines, shampoo, aftershave, hairsprays and gels, gloves, zodiacs, games, hospital equipment, flip-flops, bottles, sneakers, shoe soles, cables and wires, insecticides, and even in water hoses. Another family of endocrine disruptors is suspected of having effects on the brain and causing dyslexia or memory and attention disorders in children. It is the family of polybrominated differentiated. Before the Second World War, the industrialized world produced 1 million tons of chemicals a year. By 2005, it was 5 million. The post-war boom saw mass production, the frenzy of progress, consumerism, and petrochemical magic create the unbreakable baby bottle and plastic cutlery.
Crude oil, like everything else, is made up of billions of tiny molecules. And using the magic of research, oil companies compete with each other in taking the petroleum molecule apart and rearranging it into, well, you name it, fabrics, toothbrushes, tires, insecticides, cosmetics, weed killers, a whole galaxy of things to make a better life on Earth.
Raid's here! Raid! 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 Raid!
Yes, Raid. New bug killer discovery from Johnson's Wax.
Use Ajax, the foaming cleanser. Gets things clean, just like a whiz. You'll start paying the elbow tax when you start cleaning with Ajax. So use Ajax.
Our ordinary everyday lives are full of chemicals which escape from surrounding objects. Some have a special characteristic. They are capable of hijacking our hormonal intimacy, blocking our hormones or imitating them and affecting their levels. They are called endocrine disruptors. Natural hormones are produced by the endocrine system. The hypothalamus, the pineal and the pituitary glands in the brain, the thyroid, the thymus, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the ovaries in women, and the testes in men. Adrenaline, for instance, is a hormone that helps to control stress. A lack of insulin may cause diabetes. The body secretes the male sexual hormone, testosterone, in precise amounts and at specific times. No more, no less than necessary. A minute quantity is extremely effective. But endocrine disruptors found in plastics, phthalates for instance, can dupe the hormonal system and take over its mechanisms by blocking testosterone action. Endocrine disruptors interfere with subtle hormonal maneuvers. The result is like playing a Chopin sonata with a hammer.
When experiments, epidemiological experiments, reveal relationships between a chemical exposure and a disease, that was done in a way that you could separate the population that was exposed and the one that wasn't. Like, for example, people that apply pesticides in the fields versus people that live in the city. But when you talk about plastics, when you talk about